At dawn, the ideas and plans still do not leave her mind. Drowsy and tired, she got out of bed. Still naked, she took some long bed clothes and quickly covered herself. She grabbed a container and went out for water to the well at the back of the property. Walking near the gate in those clothes, she felt at that moment like Marco Polo. She arrogantly believed that she was better than her father. Better than all the customers in the bar in the village of Bercy. She shouldn't have to listen to the experiences of others or receive cheap philosophy. She had dominated successes and failure. She had conquered the world, and it was time to go home. She bent down to fill the container with water. As she pulled it out of the well, a dull shadow over her was created by the waking sunrise, and its blackness covered what the bedclothes on Apollon could not. A flash of lightning illuminated an angry face in that limited darkness. "Why are you undressed like this?" Gustav asked. He was standing, smoking a thin cigarette as usual. He grabbed her tightly by one arm and got her on 2 feet from where she was collecting water. He was annoyed to see her like, "I haven't protected you all this time to end up doing the servant's work." Gustav saw how differently Apollon was standing, walking, and moving. He noticed what he knew had happened. It was obvious. Her slender legs made a different scissor. There was an almost unrecognizable intentional space between them as she walked. A pleasant friction that is also uncomfortable. A move that Gustav knew very well from past relationships. "That man is dead. You shouldn't waste your time with him." Louis was behind them. He moved silently, as if he were a long white worm emerging from an None of them noticed when he arrived. "I'm much more of a man than you," he replied behind Gustav's back. Louis didn't put clothes on himself. He was still naked. Gustav looked at him with contempt. He turned to him and could not tolerate Louis's insolence. With a blow to the face, he knocked him to the ground. Louis began to cough. He was lucky that the blood that came out of his mouth did not come from his lungs because of the disease. "You, get dressed. If you didn't work at night, you will do it during the day. If you don't come with me now, then you'll have to go out and find a place to spend the night. I will not allow you to stay on this property." Gustav left as Apollon entered the house. Louis said nothing. Neither does she. None of them dared to. Apollon realized that she would have liked to see Louis facing Gustav. She thought about it. She felt helpless. One part of that great strength she thought she had was hidden behind Louis. The image of Madame Pleasant passed through her mind, and she thought she understood what she sought to compensate. It was easy for her to understand that in this city, misogyny was the same for all of them. It did not discriminate against race or age. The day shift was not as demanding as the night shift. The customers were generally younger, more charming, the women on the second floor would say, and it didn't take much effort to get them to drink something more expensive. But in the end, it was a job and no more. The tire was the same regardless of the age of the drunk. At the end of the shift, Gustav called Apollon into the office before she left the bar. She went up to the second floor with apprehension, unable to hide her heavy breathing. She knew what the conversation would be about. Rest as much as you can because tonight you will have to work. I don't want you on the day shift permanently." But Apollon did not answer. "You have to understand. You're not here to be a servant. I'm protecting you to be queen of all this and more. Do you understand? If you want to help Louis, you have to come to work." Apollon had to work all day despite being sleepless. Her mind did not let go of the helplessness she thought she had forgotten 2 years ago. But Gustav's words were comforting for the moment. She felt that they were sincere. She thought so because she was still attracted to him. Between Gustav's threat and the respect for him, there were sensual caresses that were difficult to ignore. There was an attraction perceived between the two, although sometimes it felt like an obligation. She thought maybe Gustav was right about Louis. Gustav stood behind Apollon and caressed her shoulders with his hands. pulled a cord and opened her corset. Apollin's bare back was exposed. A very attractive pink color on her skin was exposed in front of him. She remained silent, and a small and flirtatious smile came from her lips. The office was at the back of the bar. No one would come and no one would listen. No one would know what would happen. He aroused in her a warm excitement, and it was different from the one she felt with Louis some 9 hours ago. That excitement gave her the freedom to uninhibitedness at her convenience. The attraction to Gustav did not stop her. And that afternoon Apollon gave herself up to one more man. But having sex with Gustav felt different than it did with Louis. She wasn't in control. This time it felt rough and dangerous. She didn't understand what she was doing with Gustav. She also didn't understand what Gustav was doing with her, but she liked it. She stirred excitement and freedom. It seemed that the bar gave her rebellious autonomy. For a moment she even thought that she wouldn't mind at all if someone walked through the door and discovered her with Gustav, enjoying the way she was doing it. This was her moment of victory. No one would take it away from her. Nothing would ruin it. She closed her eyes. She felt something huge. She thought she couldn't stand on her feet without exploding in exultation. And without thinking about it, her mouth opened again to say a single word quietly and unconsciously. Louis. Gustav stopped immediately. By reflex, he hit her with a strong slap. What did you do with that coward Levy? He glared at her. Apollon felt threatened. She did not know that attitude. At least not towards her. It was the first time. Do you think you can play with me? I'm going to show you how I play. Gustav grabbed her by the shoulders and turned her over. No. Wait, Apollon said. Gustav didn't listen. He immobilized her by the nape of her neck, pushed her to lean over the desk, and forced her to continue with the sexual act in a rude and violent, looked like a wild animal. A huge gray bear riding a female. He hit her with his open hand on the head, and she became disoriented. He had never behaved like this with her. Apollon resisted but could not stop him. She didn't have the strength in the arms to push him away, nor in the legs to run, at least kick him. With her eyes buried and paralyzed, she thought she saw hell emerging beside her. He would strike her again, and the sight of all that was evil would multiply in that hell. She became something like a room for a funeral that is occupied and unoccupied in a hurry, without having cleaned it of sulfurous odors or yellowish colors. He was penetrating the room like an intruder embalmed with tobacco, ashes, and alcohol. He felt he was occupying it, inhabiting the empty space with pain but no condolences. The outrage turned it into an unreserved habitual. Days ago, Apollon thought that Gustav would have already lost some of his libido with age. That because of his long indifference to her, perhaps unchaste pleasures did not interest him anymore. She was wrong. And everything she felt a few moments ago vanished in a second. What followed it was not something similar. She regretted everything. When the scene ended, Gustav grabbed her face, tried to kiss her on the mouth by force, but she answered no. He was tired and tried hard not to look like it. He easily ignored her contempt and only managed to kiss lips. He lit a cigarette and offered one to her. Apollon rejected it speechlessly. She still felt disoriented. Her eyes were still spinning. He asked her with indifference what she wanted to tell him about Louis. She said nothing, with contempt and burning in her voice. He coldly asked her for forgiveness. For not knowing how to make love to her like a princess. For not letting her finish talking. But he didn't really feel remorse. It was just one more courtesy without intention. He knew very well how to handle the consequences with words. He already had plans. I know very well what you came to America for. You can fool Louis, but you cannot fool me. So, stay with me. I'll help you find it. And when you find it, I'll make sure that it stays with you. He had to keep her by his side, even if it was with lies. It was not in his nature to use the white lies. He knew the craftiest ones, and he knew how to use them. He was evil, and often turned into insomnia and nightmares. She was his best investment. The longest he would have had. He just had to wait a little longer for Louis to die naturally. It was going to be easy to keep her after the funeral. Like all his previous wives, she would start out as his personal consort. He knew it was an expensive French luxury, but he couldn't resist. After a while, when she stopped being the customer's favorite, she would end up on the stairs of the business, along with the other French hostesses. Or, in the worst case, occupying the rooms on the second floor all the time, like prostitutes for $5.